Welcome to the Glass Lab podcast, where we talk all things product development. It's our goal every month to introduce you to the people, ideas, and development tools that are shaping the hardware products we all use every day. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Drew Westrick. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Glassboard, and on the show with me today, as always, Grant Chapman, CEO at Glassboard, and we've got Nick Sturgeon, who is the Executive Director of Information Security at IU Health.
That's
correct. I got that all in there.
Right?
Nailed it. You're the cybersecurity guy, right?
Yeah, one of them.
Yep. Oh, that's fantastic. So, Nick, thanks for coming on the show today. I think this is something that we take fairly seriously here at Glassboard, just in product development in general. I mean, as time goes on, as we deal with more internet connected devices, we've also dealt with some devices in like the medical space. And obviously, cybersecurity is it's a huge industry really now, honestly. Mm-hmm. But more than just an industry, I mean, there's a lot of important things that happen, I think, both on our side of the table, which is product development, but also then on sort of your side of the table, which is really like, how do you manage these devices and ensure on your side that they're operating securely? So, I mean, love to just, talk a little bit today about that stuff. And I guess really just to start, just love to hear a little bit of your background, kind of, how did you wind up in, the cybersecurity space, and just maybe talk a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me on. I always love doing this. It's been a while since I've been on a podcast, but yeah, background wise, I've got a bachelor's degree in management information systems from Indiana State. Graduated there in 2003, kind of what do I want to do when I grow up, and ended up in law enforcement. So was part of the 67th recruit class for the Indiana State Police.
Nice.
Started in beginning of 2007, graduated July. And it's because of my IT background, early on, I got promoted to help with enterprise-wide IT stuff. So that got me into cybercrime. So went up to Purdue for a class for digital forensics, loved it, helped out there, did some internal stuff with digital forensics, and in 2014 started up there as a graduate student for master's, and that led to some other opportunities. Let's see, in 2015, went to another state agency to run a couple of cybersecurity programs for the state. Left the state after 10 years, was at Pondurance for a little bit, running their security operations center. That led to a job with Ernst & Young, and then that led me here at IU Health. So real quick, abbreviated.
That's kind of, honestly, it's kind of wild. I guess, when we first met, I didn't get a kind of a background on you, but I mean, it's pretty cool to just see just how many different, I guess, sides of this sort of that you've seen, right? I mean, everything from the law enforcement side and sort of like actively looking at like, what are bad actors directly doing in this space to harm people, all the way back around now, obviously, to basically, the preventative side of things. Like how do I get to the point where I'm not talking with the Indiana State Police about a breach that has happened? Exactly. Right.
Yeah, we love the law enforcement community. FBI, state police, local agencies have been in doing cyber crimes, the enforcement side, or post breach type of stuff. But we definitely do not want to have conversations with them, because that usually means something bad has happened.
Right.
You want to catch up with them after work at the bars from your old friends, not work together professionally, because that means that something has gone wildly wrong.
It's usually bad day for all if we're talking to them in a professional manner.
Yeah. And I mean, to be frank, I mean, I think, unfortunately, I do feel like, I feel like, at least, I mean, on the company or corporate side of things, like we're losing, right? I mean, I think based on how many credit reporting monitoring services I'm signed up for currently, based on, it seems like every 3 to 6 months, I'm getting a letter in the mail. I just got one from my mortgage company saying they had a data breach, and it's a lot of it's reactionary, right? And it doesn't seem. I mean, I'm sure there's people that are doing really good preventative work, right? And the ones that are doing the best work are the ones that you never hear about, right?
Well, and there's the saying: the bad guys only have to get right once. We have to be right 100% of the time. So the odds are not in our favor.
Right.
So that it's been a challenge. And I think also too, his history, businesses have looked at it as a major expense.
Well, because you're paying for it and if it's doing a good job, there's no reason to pay for it.
It's like,
right?
Well, we're doing so good, then okay, let's cut the budget because, so it's proving a negative, in the thought of, well, the fine or the breach is only going to cost me X amount of dollars. Well, that's less than the investment into the technology and staff. So that has shifted quite a bit, but we're still playing catch up as an industry. So it's
one of those hard to quantify, right? Because like if they steal just your bank account information, sure, you're insured and you're going to lose this much money in deductibles, et cetera. But what if they steal all of your clients' data? And then that is, this big web effect of like all the things they get into with that data that you're technically the one responsible for. And then it's game over, right? It's not just, lost revenue or lost things. Like, no, you're responsible for so much debt that you got sued because you lost these people money that you're out of business.
And I'm sure the regulatory, I think it's still playing catch up, right? I think it's one of these things. In the past as a business owner, it's like, well, if you choose not to take out, insurance on your building and it burns down, that's kind of on you, right? Like it impacts your business, right? But in the case of cybersecurity, it's like, well, it's not necessarily that the business has been directly harmed. Most of the time, sometimes it's phishing attacks or going after information that business has, and it can have an adverse effect for their business. But a lot of times it's more of like, it's not even harming them directly. It's more they're wanting access to their customers' information. And there's indirect effects of that in terms of, impacts on the brand or, when data breaches like do happen. But the question again is like, from a regulatory perspective, like what level of cyber security awareness, prevention, whatever, should businesses be sort of like obligated to have? And like, again, then that also asks, how do you go about enforcing that or ensuring that or saying, well, we're a level 5, whatever level 5 means in the regulatory atmosphere, right, of cybersecurity, right?
Yeah, and what we have seen in those highly regulated industries is that requirement ends up becoming the ceiling.
Right.
And not the floor.
Right.
Oh, well,
we made it.
Yeah. Federal government, state government says I've got to do X. I'm doing X. I'm compliant. I don't need to do anything more.
I found the cheapest vendor to implement this minimum system that is in the law, and we are checking out today.
And so you get this really kind of black hole of an effect of not doing the right
newest
thing.
And the best.
Yeah, newest and the best. And my position is, let's do what's right because it's right, and everything else will fall into place after that.
Well, it's the insurance policy, right? Like it's the thing you pay for every month and hope to never use, right? I think that's the whole narrative around cybersecurity for me is like, it's like health insurance. You hate writing that premium check because it's huge, but man, the day you get to use it, you're like, man, I'm glad we got protected from this attack, right? If you notice that your network shuts down for the day because it caught something, it's way better than that thing having gone through your whole network and then everything being gone forever.
Well, and you mentioned previously it had been really hard to quantify the investment of the cybersecurity tools, personnel, what have you. But with cyber insurance, we saw a huge premium increase industry wide of of our premiums.
Right. Like the actuaries finally caught up with what it was really costing people.
If you didn't have that level of, cybersecurity, and your premiums were going to go up.
Awesome.
So now we can show a savings.
So is this like the safe driving thing you plug in your car? Like to relate to everyone at home? Like you be good, you get better rates?
Yep. And same thing with the credit bureaus because it's tied to the insurance. So now we can say, okay, let's invest. And I'm going to throw out a number, just
$1 million.
It's $1 million.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to save us $200 million.
No, that's great.
So that's a huge
awesome.
Well, there's some good market effects happening there, right? And again, I don't know enough about this. You probably educate us, but it's like maybe even like from a regulatory side, it's more of like, we're not going to tell you how to enforce it. We're just going to say you have to actually carry for an X size business, or if you're in this space, you have to carry cybersecurity insurance, and then in effect, the market starts to regulate itself, right? Because the insurance companies now care about how good your cybersecurity is, because how good it is changes your risk profile. And it's just like everything else, within the insurance industry. Like those guys get pretty good about figuring out which vendors are good, which are bad, because
the house always wins.
It impacts their bottom line, right?
Yeah, and it's getting those companies on the boards with the cyber insurance, and there is some vetting that they do, because the actuaries, the underwriters, they are super smart when it comes to the numbers. And so as they have gotten smart, I think that's actually been a better thing for the industry than the regulation because of that effect. One, like you mentioned, it's really hard to enforce. Okay, what's
level 3?
Yeah, level 3, or because environments are so different from company to company, the way that they implement is going to be a little bit different. So it's very hard to apply a standard, level 3, level 5, whatever you want to be across the industry. And so let's let the money kind of help drive what should be. And, from a regulatory perspective, as much as I hate to say this, really, if, something happens and the investigation comes out that they weren't doing what they're supposed to, okay, let's then enforce it kind of after the fact, not go in and just be, it's just.
Well, it's one of those things like,
it's not preventative, right? It's reactionary.
Reactionary.
And then you get the data set, and this is where the actuaries come in to win, is after that happens, unfortunately, after the fact, once, okay, we don't know how or why. Twice I have seen a pattern, and the actuaries will tell me what the real stat number is, but X times now they know this practice has to be measured. We have to audit them twice a year to ensure our insurance premiums are actually they're meeting what they say they are to get the low rate they are.
Well, you love it or hate it, but I mean, I guarantee you that this will also trickle down basically even to our side of the business, right? Because we already, as a product development firm, carry, product liability insurance and other insurances, right, that protect both us and even to a certain extent our customers. And some people we work with literally say, hey, you have to have this minimum level of insurance for us to even work with you. And so insurance companies are always good about this, overlapping layers of protection, and where you can shift more of the risk of the insurance, a burden around, the better rates you get, right? So they start to play these games. But again, I think as it comes back to product development, what that's really going to mean is that, again, as this pushback comes all the way down to the product side, it's going to put more pressure on putting products into the market that already have cybersecurity sort of built into them, right? And so it's this question of if you have a castle, right? Do you try to just only invest in the walls around the castle, right? Or do you try to maybe invest in defenses within the castle, or individual pieces, or just making the people outside the castle happy so that you don't actually have to use that giant wall, right? Because it is difficult, right? I mean, and even I'm sure you can comment on this, the more you lock down a network, the more you do preventative actions, it does have an impact, even if you're willing to spend the money, on how well that network functions, right? I mean, every hour that somebody can't access an application because of a incorrect cybersecurity policy that is locking them out of something maybe that they shouldn't be locked out of. I mean, it's going to put some drag on the organization, right?
So when I first got into studying cybersecurity, there's a triangle: functionality, usability, security. And the goal is to get it in the center as possible. The more you lock something down, you have an effect on usability and functionality, and go towards usability, then you lose some functionality and security. So you want to try to get it as close to the center as possible. And this is conversations I'm having with my team and others within our IS organization is, if we lock things down too much to your effect, the users will find a way to go around it.
Sure.
To me, the highest risk activity is the ones that I can't see.
Right. The ones where I'm just going to bring this in and bring my own router in here because I have to get this signal out today.
And it's the case of in some cases, an over ambitious policy actually hurts you more than no policy at all, right? Because again, if somebody's taking an action to go out around something, that might be even worse than if they just operated with no controls in the first place, right?
Yeah. And so I'm like, also the policies don't have to be perfect. They need to be flexible, and we need to adjust them as we learn. Okay, what are people doing? What is the effect on functionality and usability? But I want that activity to be within our sensors and our IDS and all of those security tools that we have, not outside.
Right.
Because then I can see what's going on, can get metrics around them, at least get the information to get up to the decision makers so they can make better and more informed decisions.
And it's almost like you'd rather see a bad actor in your network than not be able to see them, because you'd locked it down so good if they're not in your secure enclave, you can't see them, but they're still able to do things within your building or things like that.
Yep.
So I think,
and just to me, historically, security teams have been, no, everything that comes to us, no, you can't do this, you can't do this. My philosophy is,
show it to me.
Show it to me, then let's find the best way we can do this securely. And so there is, again, that it's not so much as a compromise, so to speak, but it is coming together and collaborating on what's the best way forward to help the business do what the business does.
Yeah. But I think there's also this concept of like, if you look at like the, like a big ship like the Titanic, right? It's like, do we make the entire outer wall of the vessel as strong as possible? But if that wall has been breached, there's no additional sort of, compartmentalization within, your cybersecurity approach. Or are you willing to say, hey, if we wreck the ship, it's probably going to happen in, compartment 1, 2, and 3, but we're going to make sure that the whole ship doesn't go down, make some things that need less security be less secure in a way, right? And I think that's kind of counterintuitive for some people. It's like, well, why would I choose less security? But it's like the things that need less security, make it so that it's usable, that people in your organization aren't fighting tooth and nail to do their jobs, right? But the stuff you really care about is kind of siloed off. And I think that's your approach of if we can say yes to the things that have a comparatively low security risk and allow people to continue to function, and we're not locking things down too much, I think you can still have a vessel that on the whole is going to stay afloat, right? And even if you have a security breach, it's not catastrophic. It's potentially just in a localized environment.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I mean, it's really, okay, what are our most critical assets? Let's put our time and resources around what's going to shut the business down.
Right.
And everything else, we'll do some things that we can see if something happens and then respond to that, but is it going to be something that sinks the ship? So, that's a defense in depth approach. Okay, let's do what we need to do. We know it's going to stop 90-80% of the bad actors, DDoS attacks,
the silly
like
obvious things, right?
Silly. But let's really focus our time and energy on the things that will shut us down or hurt our clients.
Or expose you to liability. I mean, that's honestly what's crazy. Like getting shut down, that sucks. But exposed to liability is even worse, right? And I think the piggyback on that, like compartmentalization and Titanic thing, is within product development, we are building things that go into these networks. And Drew's pretty good, but a lot of people that are building this hardware stuff aren't security experts. They aren't encryption experts and don't have that kind of skill set because they've been spending their time on how microcontrollers work and learning other things. And I think there's this nexus of like making sure that our devices are secure enough that X, Y, and Z things can't be maliciously accessed, right? I think one of the biggest things for us is firmware, right? So over-the-air updates, and how do you lock down that process so a bad actor can't come in and Trojan horse your device to hide in it, and then even if you guys screen it, oh, it's cool, let it in the network, but it's not actively one of our devices. It's already been, worked on outside of your network. And I think that's the hard part.
And one of the things I'm a huge proponent of, and is kind of in a way the same concept of compartmentalization, is treating like device security, like making each device what I'll call like uniquely secure, right? So when you're securing, say, a communication channel for a firmware update or something,
for a smart toaster, we're gonna use that.
You can do something where you have a security credential that gets loaded onto that device, but that same credential goes on every device, right? Where if somehow somebody hacks that firmware or pulls that key out of that device or gets it from your CM, whatever, once they've got that, they can't just unlock that one device. They can unlock every device in existence, right? So it's like losing the master key to the building, right? Like it's catastrophic, right? Now, some people would say, well, it's better to have a master key on the building than have none at all, and that's easier, from a CM. But my concept there is that, well, that's again, it's this one giant wall approach. And if one person makes it through the wall, they have access to the entire kingdom, right? So a big thing that I push within, I think, the product development space, and basically anybody that's willing to
listen,
hear me out, I could go on for hours with
These
this.
poor
Is this
people listening to this
concept
podcast.
they make devices now where you can store the security material in a piece of silicon. It's relatively cheap, less than $1. It's hardened from physical attack, right? From people decapping the chip or trying to pull data out of it. But it's like, put your money in a very secure, small little device, utilize that device to provide security on a per device basis, which means that even if somehow somebody decaps that chip or, can glitch it or get that key out, they've only unlocked the data stream for that one device, right?
Yeah.
That one device on that one network may be insecure, but that information can't be used to compromise the security of every other device or other networks, right? And again, it goes back to this compartmentalization where, to a certain extent, it's okay if one device gets compromised. It's not okay if the compromise of that one device leads to every device in existence being compromised.
Yeah, and I think, so there's a IEEE group focusing on trust and identity, and we're looking at a very, very technical layer like that. It's like, okay, first we need to understand that device, what it does, who owns it,
who can write firmware updates.
All of the technical stuff, but then how is that communicating on, if that, to your point, if that gets compromised, what access does it have? Where is it going? And from my perspective, want to know if that device has been compromised, what it's doing, be able to see it, and then know what it's connecting to. And
what's cool about this mutual, they call it like mutual security, right? So for to bring people up to speed, for basically how things work today, like if you log into a secure bank site, generally speaking, the bank really actually doesn't care whether or not like your computer is who you say you are, right? The bank is really concerned about securing the connection between you and them, and your computer is really concerned with, is the bank website who they say they are. So this is what is like referred to as just like regular TLS or sort of one-way TLS, right? And without getting into too many details, there's basically a whole bunch of certificate authorities that reside usually in your web browser on your computer that's able to, through a sort of a trusted network of certificates, say, when I log into chase.com, that website is really who it says it is, and somebody is not rerouting my traffic to some nefarious actor who has a website that looks exactly like chase.com, right? But the problem with that is it's just one way. Like, you trust the bank, but the bank doesn't inherently trust you. The way that they trust you is really with like your username and password, right? But if somebody compromises that, they can't verify that I, Drew Westrick, am using those credentials. And again, we can go down a whole other path. There's things that are being done to solve that. But particularly on your side of things, I think it's great to start with devices that sort of have this mutual trust, right? Where the device doesn't need to just be concerned about creating a trusted connection with whatever it's communicating with, but whoever, if you're on the network, you should also be able to verify that that device is who it says it is, and it's authorized, and that it's not a fake, it's not been compromised, so on and so forth, or somebody emulating a device, right?
And that's a huge concern with this next generation of hospitals or, OT type of stuff, where you're coming in with commercial grade equipment. How do I know that, this data that's being pulled off of my Apple Watch when I go in and it's sending it to my doctor, that it's actually data from me, from that trusted device. And so we're seeing that, especially, we're building a very, very expensive new hospital with latest technologies just down the road from here. And, we see that mix between the consumer grade plus the stuff that we trust, that we vetted, and how do you do that? And even more so with telehealth and hospital at home, this becomes a huge issue of trusting those devices and making sure that, whether it's care or if it's somebody trying to maliciously get into the network. So that, you're spot on with.
This might be a good junction to talk a little bit about. You guys, you have a lab here in 16 Tech,
Yep.
right? That is sort of dedicated to cybersecurity research. But you want to talk as much as you can. I mean, obviously there's certain things you can't, but like, I think it's interesting that you guys are taking a very like practical approach to figuring this out. And I think what's cool about it in the first conversations that we had, and I realized just like how, preventative and trying to get out ahead of these things you guys are really doing. Like, you're not waiting for somebody to tell you these are the policies or this is like how we should do this. And I think it's really interesting, that kind of work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, it really goes to the trust but verify concept that we mentioned earlier. It's, we've got trusted relationships with our vendors. It's great, but I'm a very pragmatic guy, and I'm also a little bit skeptical of being, hey, yeah, everything's great, because there are some folks out there that will just say whatever they need to say to sell the devices.
Or they're ignorant.
Yeah,
It's not that they're malicious. They just don't know they have a gaping hole that no one has found yet.
Yeah.
And so to truly understand the risk of that device and what it brings into our network, we really need to have a intimate understanding of the protocols, how it communicates, all of the stuff that it does, what data is it collecting, and even eventually down to how at the chip level is that communicating the routes. And so that we know from the very, very machine level aspect all the way up to, layer 7, what that device is doing. Can we trust the information that it's generating, all that good stuff? And that's part of the big reason we opened the lab here at 16 Tech, was to be able to get that verification of those devices, understand the security, and really once one of my responsibilities is I lead our internal red team. Prior to this lab, we had no ability to conduct security testing or penetration testing on these devices. The big reason is we don't want to accidentally take a machine down that's being utilized for patient care. So this gives us that ability, 100% assurance that the devices that we're testing are in a safe environment.
Right. And that even if you do accidentally break a door open, no one else sneaks in back through the door that you didn't realize you opened.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
It's one of those, like, you don't want to be the guy like poking around, seeing how secure it is, making a hole and forgetting to patch it. Right.
Yep. So
I think of it as like, it's basically kind of like, it's your practice range, right?
Yep.
I mean, you don't put, you don't want to test devices, it's what is physically inside the network. And even then, I mean, you can say, well, it's on a separate switch or, whatever the case may be. But I think also like physically having just an entirely different separate environment to go about that is probably helpful, right?
Yeah.
You could digitally create that, but I think having almost like an air gap to your facility as well as actually probably some value, right?
Yeah, there is a lot to be said about physical separation from a network. Even if you go through all of the technical configurations, reroutings, firewalls, all that stuff, human error can lead open a protocol that,
or plug a USB flash drive into the wrong thing.
But again, it's something to be said about literally air gap is a really important concept, right? I mean, in electronics, when we're dealing with high voltages, it's literally, by the book, it says at UL, if you're dealing with a voltage over of this, you have to have physical separation between your connectors, right? Yep. I think the same applies maybe in some instances of cybersecurity to say, if you really truly need to, establish security, there needs to be an air gap. And again, maybe there is a couple of specific egress points between those two sides of things if they need to communicate, right? But yeah, I definitely think people underappreciate like just actual like physical separation of networks. Right?
And I get the question, why didn't you guys open this up in Methodist or Fairbanks or Landmark, one of the buildings that we occupy? And it's like, well, there's some good reasons for that, and plus at 16 Tech we're around other innovators, and really the thing that when I look at a hacker is really somebody who looks at things differently, looks at problems differently, wants to learn and explore, which is a lot of what innovation is. And when you go into a hospital system, what are you doing? You're going into a hospital. there's sickness.
It's like a mindset.
Yes, it's a mindset. So, but we can also say, hey, we 100% know we are not going to accidentally get into an IP range that's in a clinical setting.
Yeah,
that's
it just seems counterintuitive, right? Like we're gonna, we're gonna look at this building and we're gonna lock it down, except for this one room where we're gonna like intentionally violate all of our security principles, and we're gonna. It's okay, we've bricked it in, right? But like we're gonna do, you wouldn't do, like destructive testing in a room in a hospital, right?
Yeah.
Like it's that kind of concept, right? I think it's as much physically practical as, like you said, philosophically practical, just to kind of like get your, it's a different hat that I think you probably have to wear when you're actually doing like, it's the black hat versus the white hat, right?
Yep.
In one sense, you're actively trying to think of ways to get into the devices and hack them. On the other hand, you're thinking like, how do I keep that from happening, right?
Yeah, and that's the reason why we have an offensive security team is, we can put that black hat mindset into play, but use the powers for good instead of evil.
Right.
But you have fun while you're doing it.
And have fun while you do it. So last November, I had pretty much all of our senior leadership team in the lab, showing them around, and I'm like, I can't believe you guys pay me for this. This is so much fun. And then I got a huge chuckle from the crowd. I'm like, okay, good. That went over well. Yeah, I landed. I'm going to be able to keep my job. But it really is taking what we learn, applying it into how do we actually turn these devices and make them secure, whether it's through some type of secondary control or some monitoring or whatever the case may be. But it is understanding that device and the risk that it truly brings into our environment. Because even if you have security standards for medical devices, which are not really there, but what does that practically mean for the defensive team or the blue team, and how they actually defend those devices? And so that understanding brings a whole lot better security than just saying, vendor A says, it's safe, it's secure.
Well, and I think you can end up with a bit of a litmus test, right? Because if you come to the vendor and you say to the vendor, okay, I want to know what protocols, what IPs, what kind of communication channels do you have for this device, and how's it going to interact with our network? And assuming you're going to provide that information to you, right? Most vendors would. But if you then take that device into your lab here and you hook it up, but you monitor that network, I mean, you can actually, in many ways, verify either this port is open or it's communicating, or, they're communicating on 443, but actually, using Wireshark or something, like it's actually encrypted traffic. And they're not just saying, oh, we're using port 443. I mean, 443 provides no security, right? It's just the concept that it should be secure on that port, right?
So some high level UDP port or TCP port that is open as well, so it can communicate back channel to some maintenance server somewhere.
To get a software update. Right? Like it can make all its regular stuff secure the right way, but you realize, I downloaded that software update, like really open.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, the admin credentials are being sent over over plain text. And
even we learn on the product development side. I remember we did a product and we were just, all of our actual data streams were, 443, mutual TLS.
Is this the clock one?
Yeah. But our NTP, we're going out to get, accurate time, because part of the certificate process is our device needed a time to basically do certificate verification and whether they've been expired or, stuff like that. Right. And we're just going out to basic, unencrypted, NTB, I think it's like port 53. And, I think we're just using like the Google time server, and we ran into some places where we actually don't, even for that lowest level type thing, we don't allow that port to be open on our network. So we actually did. I mean, we had to write basically our own little like time server API that was, on 443 and actually, had an HTTPS connection for that API, because that's they wanted, and I think in some ways, rightfully so, they wanted 100% of the traffic to only be coming in and out of port 443, and they were doing packet inspection to basically ensure that the data going over that port was encrypted and not in the clear.
Yep.
So,
yeah, it's those little things that folks don't think about are what
Those are the holes.
the gaping hole
Yeah.
into somebody's network, and just being able to, for a command and control connection to be established. And a lot of the tools out there, whether it's Cobalt Strike or if it's a homegrown thing, and all it needs is a connection. It doesn't matter what port
How
it
fast
is.
doesn't
How
matter.
fast. Yeah. And it could be 1 bit every, 2 days.
And it will build something eventually.
Yep.
Yeah. No, and I think the other cool part about your lab is it forces and allows your team to touch the device, to become a user and have to set it up, have to connect to the network. And if you realize like, there's no way the care providers here are going to go through this rigmarole every time we have to turn a new one of these on for a client. We have to make a process that is secure, but isn't this painful, right? Because it's the whole thing that if you make a safety measure so painful to do, people are just going to skip it. They're going to find a way around it. And the worst thing you can do is assume that everyone's being safe, but in reality, no one is.
Yeah, and it goes back to earlier. If you make it
Middle of that triangle,
so painful, they're going to go outside the process out of the controls that we have set in place to monitor. And it's bad news because a lot of these devices now, they've got some sort of standard IT component built in, whether it's USB flash drives or it's the Ethernet or Wi-Fi or whatever. And that's really all a bad actor needs to make a connection, maintain the connection. It is scary to think how easy it is to do something. And, kind of the things that I think about is, if I was a bad actor and I go into a doctor's office to say I'm sick, and there's all these devices that are there and I'm looking, and it really only takes, a couple minutes to throw a USB stick and auto run something and open up something. Because you think of how long you're in that doctor's office.
And maybe unsupervised in the office,
waiting for the doctor because he's got 3 patients in front of you. That's plenty of time to go in and
HIPAA, privacy. I mean, it's not like they're putting cameras in every single room, right? So it's So and that's what my team gets paid to do, is to think like that. How would that do? Or social engineering. Hey, I'm an IT maintenance guy. I'm coming in here. I need to
update
get
Windows.
and to update it. So it happens. I've seen it since in the just over 3 years I've been at IU Health. It's social engineering attempts like that.
It's huge.
It's easy. Most human nature is
to be helpful.
Be helpful. Oh yeah, because they don't want to get in trouble. And, I don't want to be that security hole. And so
it's not good. I mean, we've even seen it at our company. I mean, now when we bring new people on, it's generally they will target new people in our organization, and it's getting more sophisticated, right? I mean, they're actively looking at social media, press releases, whatever, to glean, who is who in the organization, and did somebody just start, and can they utilize that? Like, I'm new here and I don't want to let people down, right?
I'm Grant, the CEO of the company. I need you to do this for me,
exactly. Without getting too specific and exactly what it is, but you're nailing it on the head. I'm sure you guys see the exact same stuff, right?
Well, ironically, like it happened and we got bit once, and then it's happened to every new hire. We at least know the very first day you come in, it's like, if I email asking you to do anything, make sure it's me. Right. Like on your first day, first couple weeks,
and it's because they use that fear as well.
Or you don't know that's not how this guy writes an email. You don't know that he wouldn't ask you to do that.
You have to think even outside of, I mean, again, it was a bit of a blind spot for me, because it's like, I'm really big on, 2FA and on, physical like device security. And in this case, it was like literally,
social engineering
somebody to go physically go do something like with something, basically, company card. Right. And again, the irony is that we're really well protected from like trying to keep people from putting that into the wrong website or whatever. And we just never thought about the fact that, somebody would just physically take it outside the building, right, and go do something with it, right?
Yep.
So it just broadens your horizons to what the current. They're going to find the attack vectors, right?
Yep.
The moment that you plug one hole or defend against one type, like there's always going to be it's a cat and mouse game.
That's
right?
why it's so hard. And go back to how we started the conversation. That is why it's so hard for us, and that's why it seems like we're failing. And I don't maybe like to use those terms, but it becomes a real difficult challenge, and to stay on top of those things. And
it's one of those things that they only have to win once, and you have to win 100% of the time. So I think the better metric to measure is the insurance companies is, what are my odds? How are we doing? How would you rate us? Because that's, as we talked about, that is actually the premium.
Yep.
And this is this bar of, I can't be perfect. There's no expectation. No human in the world is actively perfect at anything. But am I better than average? Do I get lower premiums than another vendor you may use, or things like that?
And it's a little bit humorous, but you just need to run a little bit faster than the next guy to you for the bear.
Unfortunately,
that's so happy you brought that up.
That's a big part of the game, though, right? I mean, if your house, if you've got the most secure house on the block,
they're going to pick your
secure
neighbor
enough? Well, maybe not, but it's more secure than my neighbor's house, and the robber's going to go after him before he goes after me, right?
Yeah, and
they're inherently lazy.
Yeah, they are. And having dealt with criminals for a chunk of my career, they only want to do what's the most efficient for them to get the biggest bang for their effort.
It's human nature,
Yeah,
right?
it
I mean,
is.
it doesn't matter whether they rob banks for a living or engineer products for like to a certain extent.
You
I mean,
get the most out of it.
It is kind of human nature, right?
Yep. No, and before I don't know how much time we have left, but I do want to bring up something about this being a shared responsibility. So I think historically, through my experience, and this is not a criticism, it's just stating a fact, I think it's like, let's get the product out there, and the security ends up being to the right of the scale on the customers.
It's the afterthought.
Yeah. And this was something I heard at a conference that I spoke at last year, November timeframe, where the actual cost to do security at the customer side actually ends up being a whole lot more than if we start sharing that cost and pushing some of the responsibility to the left, to the manufacturers.
Yep.
And it's also collaborating with them. Hey, what are you doing? What is the practical application? And it's not necessarily, we don't want to go too far and say, product developers, you have to do all of the security, because that's just not practical, and it's not going to be.
That's the usability
cheap.
thing. If they're not going to do it,
Yep.
don't make them do it, because they'll find a way around it, right?
Yep. So how can we have that conversation to say what's a minimally acceptable, standard once it comes out of manufacturing that then we can build upon once it gets into use?
And I think there's two facets to this that I think are super important to pick that up. One is you guys need to educate and inform and give a tool set and a suggestion set to the engineers, because we actually like winning. We like doing things right. We like designing the latest, the best, the baddest version of something. So if I think a lot of the product developers are just ignorant of the security concerns because that's not their lane, not their wheelhouse. And if you guys and the insurance companies, and more important, this is my second point, is once it's a standard like a UL standard or a medical device standard, you can't sell in that market, because Target won't carry it if it's not UL certified, or hospital won't carry it unless it passes this standard. Don't make it so hard no one's going to do it, or they're going to cheat it all the time, but make it real and practical. But in that standard and what you guys publish what you really want them to do, because we use tool chains all the time. You and I have developed a lot of products, and we have a handful of what looks like wildly unique things we invented for this, some mechanism. Most of what we do is take Lego bricks, whether that is a microprocessor and a code base, and we'll build off it and customize it to do an end purpose. It's very unique. But I think that the more tools we have in our toolbox, the better we can make them the way you want.
Security is getting baked into, like Grant said, the tool set, especially on like the product development side, more and more. So that's the good news. Is it like, if you look at our tosses out there, for instance, even for microcontrollers now, cryptographic security is almost always in the feature set now. It's very rare that you're buying a device that isn't being sold with some kind of secure enclave or some sort of hardware acceleration.
TPM or something.
Yeah, because again, for a long time, it was like, cryptographic security is it's resource intensive, and you have a resource constrained device, whether it's battery, compute, whatever. A lot of times it's on the chopping block. We just don't have the computational. So for a long time, it was like, well, we can't do advanced cryptographic security on the device because we don't have the resources to do it. So we have to leave it up to the bigger, badder computers and network gear because, down here at the $1 microcontroller or $2 microcontroller level, we just can't afford to do it. That is no longer really the case for the most part. I mean, there's very cost-effective stuff that now has that built in. So that's the like physical like device, sort of like the state of the art level. There's then, I think, from where we sit, the conversations that we have with our clients about security and about the importance of it, right? Because unless they're selling into a space that has very stringent requirements or cares a lot about security, it's not really something that the client looks as like a feature that's going to help sell their product. It's just like, I'm going to pay for development in security, but what am I going to get back from it? And so the way I try to approach this conversation with our clients, it's important. I mean, the security piece is important. I, philosophically believe in these concepts, but in trying to sell it is cryptographic security can also do other things that they do care about. And that's what I try to talk to this can help you shore up your supply chain. Basically, we can ensure that, if you're using an overseas vendor, maybe somebody that you don't fully trust, we can do things like ensure that they're only building the number of devices that you authorize. We can also do things with IP security. So if you've spent a whole bunch of money developing this unique feature set or this other thing, your competitor can't just come along and dump the flash out of your microcontroller and bam, they can sit there and stamp out as many as they want, right? So I think there's other ways to basically use the cybersecurity and cryptographic tools to provide value to the person that is making the product and selling the product to the marketplace, while also increasing the security for their end customer. And it's sort of like this halo effect of benefits that can derive from all this. So I really do believe in applying cybersecurity sort of like holistically and not just only to one end, right? We're only going to use cybersecurity to handle IP protection, but we're not going to secure the customer data. To me, I look at it as like, if we're going to do this, we can provide benefits for everybody.
And show that it's a competitive advantage over, their, competitors. So, hey, I'm more secure. And especially now with data privacy laws coming in where they can say, hey, we're going to help, protect your information as a customer. Again goes, why do I need my toaster oven to have security?
Right.
It isn't
the toaster oven. It's because the toaster oven might get a hold of your doorbell camera or your internal host security cameras.
Some of the ways you do the implementation also makes back to your point with like the insurance of like, there's an ROI. If you do cryptographic security right, in my opinion, you can so to speak, kill two birds with one stone. If I put down a device that's got key security on it, I no longer really have to worry about provisioning the device or figuring out how's that device going to, get the information or the key material that it needs to talk back to, our servers where we're going to send data. Well, if I have a piece of hardware that I put down on the device and the manufacturer sends me a manifest with basically all those certificates, I can upload that manifest to a server. And when that device comes online for the first time at the CM, it's already provisioned because it's right there physically in the hardware they put down, and it already has that secure connection back. So we no longer have to spend money on this end of line tool or process or time to actually provision a device and then trust that whoever we give that device to is going to use it correctly and not their network's not going to be secure where that device can get hacked. So you can remove a whole lot of complexity from this and how you choose to implement it that provides, again, the value proposition, like you said earlier, where it's to say, hey, we're going to spend some time developing this and there's going to be some costs here, but you're going to get those back on manufacturing by eliminating all of these things, right?
And it's compartmentalization. How, where are the really secure things I care about? If I have one really hard to break safe, that might be better because then all the other things I don't have to worry about, right? And that's how you protect it. And that safe only exists on that device, right?
No, so it's truly, the good news is it's truly getting to a level, even all the way down to the smallest devices, where it's almost you have to willingly choose not to apply the security, not that you can't for resource constrained reasons
or cost
so
constrained
that is the
reasons.
good news. It is getting better, and people care about it more every day on sort of like our side of the equation. And again, the real question is, how do we do a better job of then communicating what security is on the device? How do you get all of that so that information can cross that border? And that's really the real question. I think your lab is going to have to be there for a while, right? Like there's going to have to very much be, there's going to have to very much be this trust but verify model. But no, legitimately, hopefully it doesn't have to be there one day, because there is standardized ways of doing these things where, you can know that if somebody has taken this approach, that because you've tested it, that the 10 devices that took this approach, that you verified it, they are secure, right? That they do what they say they're going to do.
That's how you can scale that. So you don't actually have to test every single device. You bring in a small sample size, come in. Okay, it does what it says it's supposed to. Boom. You can 1,000, 100, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, like money transactions, they have what's called PCI compliance, right? For like cash registers and all that kind of stuff, right? That's gotten pretty good. They've gotten pretty good about like securing and locking that down. Obviously, financial industry loses a ton of money due to fraud. They have figured this out. They've applied the resources and the standards, but they've had a lot of time to develop that.
And if you don't get compliant with their standards, you cannot do transactions on their network.
Visa, MasterCard, whoever, they will not let you run credit cards through a piece of electronics that's not PCI compliant, right? And again, it all goes all the way back up to the fraud and the insurance and all of it, right? And the thing about it is, and sadly is, we need to figure out a way to do this before the pain point is so high and so costly that we take countermeasures, right? And I think this can be applied to whether it's cybersecurity or global warming, whatever the case may be. I mean, as humans, it'd be great if we could figure out how to start to solve problems before they're like really painful.
What's that tolerance? It's like, it's the frog in boiling water.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, no, Nick, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I think this was a great conversation. I mean, really, I really love talking about things on like both sides of the equation, right? Because I think it balances out the conversation. It helps us really understand, again, like I said before, a lot of this stuff really actually comes from learning by just either doing or interacting with clients and understanding their needs and stuff. So,
and we can't just put all the responsibility on one side or one person or one company. It really does need to be a collaboration. And at the core of the lab, in the document that I wrote up to justify internally, was this is a collaboration project. We need to be working with the manufacturers. We need to be working with other hospitals. We need to be working with all the stakeholders that have skin in the game to make sure we come up with the best solution and to make sure we're learning and growing from the issues that we're seeing.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everybody. We'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.